Good morning, everyone. My name is Dabo Guan. I'm from University of East Anglia School for International Development. I'm a climate change economist, and we have a big, well, one of the largest climate change research center in Europe, called the Keynote Center for Climate Change Research. I grew up with ecological economics analysis. Over the last 15 years, has been working on climate change mitigation work quite a lot. And I think it's my first time to be here in Taiwan, and I'd like to give an overview about my work over the last few years, including some of the climate change mitigations. Because the climate change mitigations and adaptations is, it is connected. Very much closely connect to each other, and the major half hour roughly of my talk will be focused on one of the new concepts we introduced or developed over the last 3 years, what we call the disaster footprint. Most of my work has a larger link with the international trade, so all the work through the mitigation or adaptation is always linked with the trade issues. So let me just start the work. Firstly, my contributions in the IPCC-R5 is on the third working group 3, and it's on the international trade and embodied CO2 emissions flows between the world regions. So this is one of the figures that you can find in the IPCC-R5 chapter 14. So it's basically they group the world regions, world countries into 10 world regions, and the embodied emissions through the international trade is majorly happened in East Asia, mainly it's mainland China, and 27% of the Chinese emissions is actually contributed by producing export for other countries' consumption. So. So where those emission flows from is from China. 1/3 of them flow from China to Western Europe, the traditional non-European countries, the developed countries, and another one third it goes to the U.S. and Canada, so it's North America. Another 1/3, well, 1/4 roughly goes to Japan, Australia. So roughly the 60% of the emission embodied in Chinese export is consumed by the OECD countries. So people know in Paris in the end of November and early December we are going to have another COP meeting. So there's going to be another negotiations about responsibility in terms of emission reductions. And really, it's just whose responsibility and who should take more responsibility in terms of emission reductions. So this is 1 year, it's 2004. And if we look at the growth rate, so this figure is a cumulative emission growth in terms of embodied emission in international trade over 1990s to 2008. So it's 18 years time period. Emission growth is this much in East Asia, mainly contributed by China. And again, the similar story happens. 1/3 is triggered by the European Union's consumption, and then United States, Japan, Australia as well. That's the international trade, emission body in the trade within China, within the mainland China. So the story is similar. It's always emission flows from western part of China to the eastern part to south, from the north to south. So basically, really, is from the economic lack developed regions to economic advanced regions. So basically, you can see how the emission flows, and the raw materials and the preliminary processed materials or products is actually exported to the 3 richer places, 3 richer provinces, and further processing and go out to the other countries. So this is the CO2 emissions. In Taiwan, possibly we don't have much issues about air pollution or the PM2.5, which is not an issue, but in the MAC cities in China, in Beijing, Shanghai, the PM2.5 emissions is very severe. And from the if you look from the trade perspective, looking at using PM2.5 as an indicator to look at how it's been driven, it's a similar story as a CO2. So it's roughly the OECD countries. They are the major contributors to one of the major contributors. 25% of PM2.5 emissions is driven by the export production. Last year, we published a paper, largely arguable, in the Peanuts. So basically, looking about the Chinese PM2.5 air pollution actually dispersed over the Pacific from China to west coast of the U.S. So basically, it's Los Angeles and San Francisco, basically. And so really, we are saying that those emission dispersion is driven by the U.S. imports of Chinese goods and services, basically for U.S. consumption. So really, CO2 emission is a global pollutant, but the air pollutants and sometimes the water pollutants, they are local pollutants, but actually they need global effort to address the overall reduction on mitigations. That's all the international and the national figure. So over the last few years, we look at the national, subnational, so in the provincial level as well. So the per capita CO2 emissions among the 30 Chinese provinces really is shifting from the developed regions to the western part, which is less developed part. So Inner Mongolia and Ningxia, which is traditionally less developed, less economically developed regions, they have a higher, they are highest per capita CO2 emissions right now. The per capita CO2 emission in Inner Mongolia is roughly about 20 tons per person per year, which is similar like the US per capita per year already. The data uncertainty. So the Chinese statistics and not only Chinese statistics, but many of the statistics, all the energy data, all the emission environmental accounts in developing countries are not well documented. A couple of years back, we published a paper in Nature Climate Change, looking at it for the first time to point out there's a big gap, which is a 1.4 gigatons of CO2 emissions gap, calculated by using two official statistics in China. So the 1.4 gigatons is 20% of Chinese total, or 5% of the global total. So it's not like an uncertainty anymore, it's actually something going on. Over the last 4 years, we have been working on this work and trying to figure out what is the real Chinese emissions. Because the question is very important. Because in the climate negotiations, you need to know your accurate data, how much you actually emit. Then after that, you talk about how much you're gonna reduce, how much you're gonna mitigate from. So again, it's not in press anymore. It's published last month, 20th of August, in Nature. We got this paper looking at using collaborating with the Chinese Academy of Sciences. They have a big project they call it the Carbon Project, and they're trying to look at the coal samples and coal consumptions in China. I figured out the right line is really the Chinese emissions, what we think the Chinese emissions are, and comparatively to the international agencies like IPCC, the fifth assessment report, published by IPCC, the official data sets for the across IPCC are 5 EDGA data sets and CDIC, so CDIAC. So EDGA is a European Union data set, and CDIAC is a US carbon dioxide information analysis center. So it's a US data set. So comparatively speaking, the Chinese emissions are actually overestimated as far as to 14% in the year of 2013. And so basically, the reason for that is that China burned a lot of low-quality coal, such as brown coal, but when the international agencies calculate to estimate Chinese emissions, they actually apply a higher emission factors for the Chinese emissions. So basically that's my short introduction about the overview of the climate change mitigation side of the work over the last few years. And I'd like to look more, interesting on some new concepts we developed a few years back. Currently still developing actually, what we call flood footprint or disaster footprint when you apply to a different type of disasters. So what I really look, I'm more like a trade economist. So really from the trade international or inter-regional trade perspective, looking at not the direct impact or direct damage of the flooding events or any climate extreme events, but the indirect impact of along the supply chain of the economic regions. So I just basically, it started in the UK because I work in the UK. So basically flooding in one region can impact the whole economy. Ignoring those knock-on effects actually means we may ignoring the economic benefits and beneficiaries of the flood risk management. In 2007, there's a major flooding in the UK. The direct costs for the UK economy is about 3.2 billion pounds. But the wider impact through the wider economic supply chains is actually can add another 50 to 250%. So this is a statement from the environmental agencies in the UK, basically the the UK Environment Protection Bureau, and they have a big range here. So it's a 50 to 250%. Really, they don't have a robust or any methodology to address what are the indirect impacts. But really, we were trying to fill the gap and trying to look at what the methodology can be used and how you can estimate the indirect impact. So after that, we developed this flood footprint. Firstly, the definition is still ongoing development. It's not like say absolutely robust yet. So what I call the flood footprint is a measure of exclusive total economic impact that's directly and indirectly caused by a flood event to the flood region and wider economic systems. Flood footprint is measured by monetary units, like a pound or dollars, for a region, or a GDP or GBA of the regional. So it's economic. So basically, it's the policy stakeholder can use it straight away, and to see really one event or a sequence of events, how much of the GDP, local GDP or GBA they can produce, they can generate from. I guess people would have some of the understanding about direct, indirect. Just make it more clear. For example, if it's a flooding happens in one region or city, and for example, a city in, let's say, it's in Taipei, for example, your metro system or your subway system was possibly shut down. Your electricity will be shut, maybe, and household being flooded, and rescuing, etc. So all those are direct impact without maybe some physical assets damage as well. But because of the transportation system closed down, what's the knock-on effects through the supply chain? For example, you can't catch a plane anymore, like meetings being cancelled, therefore the transactions of the economic activities being delayed or cancelled. So all those in the different layers of supply chains until the other organizations, that's what we call the indirect impacts. Again, it's a different, on the left-hand side, basically if it's a pre-disaster condition, different dots means the different organizations. Within the boundary of this, the study regions, if those places or those organizations have been flooded, we want to see what's the impact to other dots, other organizations in the region. There's, on the literature to study the indirect impact is not very thick. It's actually very thin, and we mainly there's a couple of, there's three methodologies to do that, but mainly it's really two. So we are trying to use the input-output analysis, what I grew up with. For the people, possibly there's a few economists here, but for those of you who have an engineering background, I just have a few slides about input-output analysis. So input-output analysis is one of the cornerstones for the modern macroeconomic analysis. So the guy, the economist called Wassily Leontief, he developed the input-output analysis. He did a PhD dissertation about I/O analysis in 1930s. And so really it started as an economic tool, really to start to understand unemployment after the Second World War. And then this work has been using I/O. It was a whole part of the current social accounting analysis or CGE models. And because of his contributions on that, Leontief got the Nobel Prize in 1973, 2 years after the first time, 2 years after the Nobel Prize given to the economic subject. Input-output analysis is just, long story short, this can be summarized into this picture. So basically, it's a chicken. Gather the bugs and then produce eggs. So really, they get the inputs from the earth, all the small animals, and then their outputs are the eggs. And during this part, it's a technology really. So it's the processing. So if say. Basically the American chicken or the Chinese chicken will be different because of the processing will be different here. It represents the technology here. So of course the output will be slightly different as well. So this is the summary for the I/O analysis. And it's the I/O analysis grounded in the technology relation of the production, provides the full account for all inputs into the production. So in summary, it actually connects all the economic sectors together through a big matrix. So it tells you the interchange between economic sectors. Therefore, you can really model the different supply chains of when they have something happened, what's the impact to the economic supply chains. Right, let's skip for that. Based on the input-output analysis, we develop an adaptation model, what we call regional adaptive input-output analysis. This is the whole framework so far. Basically, we need the yellow part as a primary input, the yellow colored as a damage function. So what we need to estimate or we need to get the input for the physical damage first. How many households being flooded? If it's flooding, then what's the basically insurance company would provide such information. How many cars, the value of the cars, how many roads and then transport systems has been delayed, etc. and then some of the this is traditional damage functions on that. So damage functions would break down to the industry capital use and the residential capital, basically. And then I feed into the framework. We look at the capital input, the capital damage, also the labor damage. This is the new, it's a very new thing to take labor into the considerations. Because in the modern city, the mega city like in Taipei or other cities, labor, the capital damage for the direct damage, usually is relatively small. And then the insurance company would have a good record for those things. But the labor delays or the labor productivity, availability and productivity constraints are not well captured. And we're trying to capture those things because for the productions, it's capital and labor are major or the primary production input into the economic productions. And then after this whole, not say complicated, but you got the output saying that you calculate the direct losses and the indirect losses, and we can trace what's the most impacted region, impacted sectors, maybe hiding in the supply chains. I show you in a few minutes on the time of the recovery back to the pre-disaster conditions. Firstly, after we done that, we apply our study to one of the cities in the UK, which is in Sheffield, in one of the flooded regions in the UK. And the direct damage in 2007 flooding in that city is £295 million, which is about 3% of the local GBA. And the indirect damage is about £276 million. Another 3% on the top of the direct damage. So the flood footprint is about 6.8% of the Sheffield GBA. And it's roughly took 20 months to fully recover to the pre-disaster level, pre-flooding level. So this is basically the things. If we set the pre-disaster as a 1, so as a condition you're going back to, you plan to go back to, then your shock, basically the flooding happens here, and you recover, until this is fully recovered. All the highlighted blue regions are the flood footprint. So there's many many people would argue that actually the flooding or the disaster is good for the economy because it triggers the economic growth. So let me tell you things. For the growth rate, yes, you can see that if it's flooding happens, if it's no flooding, your growth rate is 0 almost, if you say. But if you have flooding, your growth rate is much higher than 0, so it's positive growth. But from the absolute amount of the accounting for the economic production, without flooding, you are constant produce. Even without growth, you are actually producing this much. But the growth after the shock, you're actually trying to make up what you lost from. So firstly, is trying to make up the stocks. Of course, the people will say this is a hypothetical scenarios. After the flooding or after any shock, it will never go back to pre-disaster. That's also true. But you will have to replace more or less the same to the capital stock you make up, and the labor, really the company would sort of recap up the labor delays or the activities being delayed because of the labor constraints. Some of the sectors would have benefits. For example, construction sectors, they would have a short-term benefit in terms of, because they need to build. You don't need, for certain sectors it's slightly different, but for the overall economy, really the disaster doesn't help the economic output. It's help a little bit on the growth, but growth is not what we aim to achieve. So this is the overall. Let's recap a little bit. So there's imports, the city or anything, so there's largely relying on import and export. So the import is one of the major way to quickly recovery. So we really we separate the with import and without import, how the economy can be recovered. So the right line here is really if the city is sustained by itself, without much help from imports. And the thoughts here is really with the help from imports. But the imports is, people say the import is indefinite. It is a lot. If this region happened, and you got imports, you can get imports as much as you want because the other part is not flooded. For the availability, yes, but the amount of the import you bring in to the city for rescuing, for other things, is constrained by the transportation conditions. If all your roads, railways, and airports being closed down, it's a very limited amount you can import from. So you need to have in this model, we are actually constrained the amount of import with the road condition or the transportation capacities you will have to do this recovery. Later on, because the European Union, the European Union project is to study the direct and indirect impacts in Central European countries. So we studied 2 case studies. I listed one here. So in 2009 flooding in Central European countries. So Czech Republic, Austria, Poland, and Germany as well. So this highlighted regions had a major flooding in the summer of 2009. Similar story, basically the full economic flood footprint for the event is about 0.05% of the national GDP of Germany. But Germany is the 4th largest economy in the world for one event. And this is the breakdown with the four countries. And we not only study the country, and there's 26 or 27 regions within the 4 countries. And we studied each of the regions and give the breakdowns of the flood footprint for each regions. Forgive me about my German. I have no ideas. Basically is one of the regions with anyway. So it's a manufacturing region. So they got the most direct flooded here. But if we look at Austria, it's very interesting. Wien, Wien is Vienna basically in German, and Vienna doesn't have a direct flooding a lot, but they are the highest, or they are second impact region in the whole 4 countries, just mainly due to the indirect loss in Vienna. Lots of people, residents outside of Vienna, got impacted because of transportation disruptions. So they can't go to work, and because of the labor availability and constraints, they got a high, very high indirect cost in Vienna. The sector breakdown. If we break the sectors into about 20 different sectors, let's give you basically the direct and indirect losses between the sectors, and it also tells you how much each sector will have. And what I want to point out here, the business sectors. If you think about it, if any flooding happened in city in Taipei, for example, major business companies, they wouldn't be able to, they're very unlikely to get direct flooded because they are the high-rise buildings, and they very unlikely to get a direct impact. But their indirect impact is huge because those labor in the service sectors, they are largely rely on labor. And if this labor cannot travel, and each of the labor working in the service sector carry the huge value of the value added on each of the employees. And if their employees got delayed or cancelled or they can't go to work, actually the daytime of the loss is much higher than the manufacturing sector or the primary sector we didn't talk about here. So the labor constraints or the transportations is crucial for major like in Taipei. I would suppose the major sectors, major GDP contributors are the service sectors. So that's basically the sectors hiding in the supply chains. If we don't study the indirect costs, you actually don't really see this. And the service sectors are actually benefiting the most if we are manage to adapt or mitigate the risk, the flood risk or another risk we will have. Early this year, from last year, we start to look at the Chinese case studies. I got a PhD student did this work, and so it's looking at there's a major urban flooding in the flash floodings, or somebody called surface floodings. So the different people from the different engineer background have a different names, but it's really it's urban floodings in China, in Beijing, in 2012 in July. And so the direct damage are here. So direct damage estimated by the Chinese government is 11.6 billion yuan in Beijing. 79 people died over the event. 1.9 million people are affected to some degree. So we applied to the Beijing, the flooding into our model. Of course, we did also work looking at the transportation delays and other type of work. So the direct loss is about 11.6 billion. 11.6 billion yuan. The indirect is about 3 times higher. So the direct and the indirect damage ratio is 1 to 3. Compared to the study I gave on Sheffield is 1 to 1 almost, because Beijing is much. It's not that Beijing is less resilient, but it actually is less resilient than to the indirect cost, because of the economic settings for Beijing is largely relying on the large service sectors, on the IT sectors, and the service sector. But compared to Sheffield, most of the business sector are the small and medium-sized enterprises. So for comparison, we also did I'm not showing here, but we also did Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina in the U.S. So their direct indirect ratios are up to 1 to 7. And some of the cases, people saying that due to the sensitivity analysis, 1 to 20. So really, the indirect cost of that will be huge. If you know a little bit about the Hurricane Katrina, they are still starting to reconstruct. If you count for that, it's even huge, even greater on that. The total flood footprint for the Beijing is 46 billion yuan, which is about 2.6% of the Beijing local GDP on that year. A similar story, you break down the important things. Okay, so that's the flood footprint for that. And I have a few slides about what we call persistent disasters. It's really trying to look at for drought or heat waves. This is kind of more constant disasters or the events, and see what's the indirect impact. So this is still under development, but if we look at the air pollution, we see in the air pollution as one of the say a disaster. And we see what will be like. It's from the economic perspective, air pollution has, to some degree, has some similarities to the heat and to the drought. You don't really compare to the flooding. Because flooding, a hurricane or typhoon, you come, and then you go after a couple of days or a few days they're gone, then you recover from there. But for the heat waves and droughts, it really is going there, and long term, you don't really have a recovery from there. You actually, from that, you adapt from that. And you see what will be the impact for that. Give you some of the details. The air pollution in China. In 2007, in terms of people's calculation, including our calculations and others, basically is each year is about 1.2 million people dead in China because of air pollution health impact. And if we go into this, is a multidisciplinary work. So basically, we got the emission inventories, and fill into air quality model, and you give you the pollution PM 2.5 concentrations, and then you apply to the health model. It tells you how many people die, how many go to hospitals, how many go to see outpatients. And then you come to the economic sectors and you see how many labors is damaged, or how many labor has been going to hospital, can't work, or low activities. And you apply to the economic model and really see what's the overall economic impact for that. So for the 2007, the overall economic loss we calculate up to 3% of GDP across the 30 provinces in China. Up to 3% is maximum. So it's been mainly between 1 to 3% of GDP in terms of different assumptions we make there. And the eastern part of China suffered the most because firstly they got the most of the concentrations of the PM 2.5, and they have lots of high value-added service sector, also manufacturing sectors, and therefore the impact for them directly and indirectly are the most. Directly meaning the health impact of labor. Indirectly, it's knock-on effects because of labor can't perform, and then also to the supply chains. Right, so that's just some demonstration about the disaster footprint. Another thing I really want to give a few minutes about the not even ongoing, just started the big data analysis we have. And I'm not an expert on this, but fortunately I got some guy who worked for me who has some of the background of big data analysis. But so I'd like to show this. This is nothing going really concrete or robust yet, but I really want to understand how the disaster would help or would impact on social change and social impact. So when I developed this disaster footprint, I always want to have 3 ways to look at these things. One from the economic way, like I said just now, and the other is the social perspective. The third will be environmental perspective. I have no idea how to do the environmental side yet, but has some steps on tries, attempts on the social side. So we use the Twitter data for the Hurricane Sandy, trying to look at how people react on Twitter in Hurricane Sandy. The original question is really trying to understand how the individuals, communities and organizations affect and respond to the extreme weather events, and how they can adapt. So basically how people get information when they're under stress, when there's an event come here, how they respond, how they trust the information, and who they trust, and how the governments or the authorities will help people in terms of mitigates reduce the loss basically. The Hurricane Sandy basically give the overall view on the 23,000 people looking for shelters, and there are 8.5 million people lost power, etc. 73 people died during the event, and this is how the Hurricane Sandy is being formed, starting from here and it goes here and hit the New Jersey and goes to New York. So the whole thing is here. And we gathered this overall 10 days, 10 days period, and we got the Twitter data. We actually sort of bought the Twitter data for 600 million tweets for the 10 days. So all the tweets contains hurricane or Sandy on this during the 10 days. With the 600 million tweets, without much of the support from supercomputer, you can do very little. Really, we look at the basic statistics here. So this is all 600 million tweets here, and then you see where they're coming from. So really, the landfall in New Jersey, the tweets, they start here, and then so this different pikes is the time of the year. And if you break down these tweets into different countries, of course, United States are the highest. The second, United Kingdom, Canada, you can understand it's they are closely relative. But the most interesting is that Spain and Brazil is the third, also the fourth and fifth largest tweets. And to bear in mind, what we got the tweets all in English. We don't include any Spanish. It's all English tweets. Which is quite funny. We need to look further on that, since we don't know what's the reason why the Brazil and Spain care these things so much. And then divided by the United 50 states, of course, New York, New Jersey is the most, lots of tweets here, and others as well, so including the mainland of the part. 1% of the 600 million tweets has a geotagged. So whatever, when you send tweets online, sometimes you have a geotag associated on that. So this is 1%, and where they're coming from. Breakdown into local authority level by the United States. So really, you see where the hits it from, they are the most tweeted. So this is New York, and but on the west coast, these two dots are the San Francisco and the Los Angeles. So really, you see the major cities and the people, the user of the Twitters are showing on this. So this is pretty much we got so far on the Hurricane Sandy on the social part. And when we present these things, and actually head of the Tyndall Center, the Carolina Curry, posed us how you can link with the politics on this. And we never thought about that. And then said, okay, we'll have a go. Because during the Hurricane Sandys, there's an election period for Obama and Romney for the campaign. Many people, I know that the Taiwan politics is complex, but the U.S., anybody else, it's interest in the U.S. Politics. So during that time, Obama and Romney is competing each other. And we want to see whether this Hurricane Sandy or climate extreme event will help Obama to win the elections. Many people say that, but let's see how the statistics says. So we break the period into three parts. We don't look at the three lines. We just look at the blue lines. It's called the positive. The red ones, the negative ones. The positive one is easier. The blue lines. So before the Hurricane Sandy happened, the positive saying for Obama is below 25%. But if we look at the Romney, because it's like that, it's roughly about 40% if you take the average. But after the Hurricane Sandy, Obama's positive rate is going up. By the end of this year, by the end of the period, it's going up to 35 to 40% already. But if you look at Romney, it's below 25%. So so during give you some background. So the Obama after the Hurricane Sandy, during this time, they're all going to campaigns. They're going everywhere, go to different states for campaigns. After the Hurricane Sandy starts, Obama saying, "I stop campaign. I will, focus on rescuing and recovery from Sandy. But Romney was saying that, okay, I will continue for the campaign. So this is what happened over the 10 days. Of course, we don't have further data later on after the 10 days. But in that 10 days, you actually see the change. And whether it shows the Hurricane Sandy or the climate change will impact politics, it's still questions, but the big data tells you something there. I think I'm over time quite a bit already, and I just stop here.
谢谢关教授。在场各位不知道有没有问题想要？
Yes, well, thank you for your clear presentation. I just wondered about the flooding footprint. It was quite an interesting story you told, and I just wonder whether you could use it in a more proactive way. Are you familiar with any studies where they used doing some flood modeling and trying to estimate what would be the direct and indirect costs, and use this information for in a proactive way anticipating what could happen and use it for adaptation, for instance. It could be an interesting tool, I think, within the TICAT toolbox, perhaps, to look at it to look as a more proactive tool for estimating where adaptation would be needed.
Yeah, that's true. Well, it's various things. I started this flood footprint analysis about three years ago, and actually the first guy I talked is Mark Fletcher working in Arab, the company Arab, and basically at that time he was saying that he's the global director for the water, one of the three bosses in Arab. So he is highly interested on that because Arab is doing some part of the Arab is doing about building resilience, like eco cities and blue-green cities, this kind of thing called. And so got very much interested and asked me to see whether they can develop it commercially in that way. And later on, my university asked me whether it can be a toolbox as well. They can be, but I haven't really. I'm an academic researcher, so not really interested too much on the wider application is the impact as well. Maybe in a few years' time, yes, but right now it's still lots of the methodology is not fully done yet. Right now, we're mostly confident to look at the within one region, if we say in Taipei, so one city. But what I really want to say, want to look at is the impact if it happens in Taipei. What's the impact to Kaohsiung or Tainan or even to mainland China? So this is required multi-regional studies. We started on that. It's not finished yet. The city level work is. So we started with a Japanese case studies. We worked with Shigemi Kagawa and Tsunagi Managi. Working in the Managi was in Tohoku University, but right now it's in Kyushu now. So look at the Fukushima nuclear incidents. Looking at the multi-regional within the because that is much more complicated because it's an earthquake. The tsunami. Earthquake triggers tsunami. Tsunami triggers the nuclear. Earthquake and tsunami is a similar type of from economic perspective. It's similar to Guan, and they come and gone. You recover from there. But because they trigger the nuclear is like. It's also different than the drought. You don't really adapt. You just leave it there. So it has, maybe 20 years. So we'll see the overall economy. The preliminary, we are still refining the results. The preliminary result is how the one incident linked to the global trade, because possibly people heard because of the tsunami, the nuclear things, many small manufacturers closed down in whole regions in Japan, like in the which company? I think Land Rover. They stopped. One of the car companies, I can't remember, in Europe, they stopped a certain type of car production for 9 months because they're looking for substitutes. Substitute for different people. It takes them 9 months to look at the same substitute. And the whole event, to look at the world trade models, is about 0.5% of world GDP for one single event's impact. Of course, I didn't take the Germany saying that we will stop the nuclear and then we will go for coal or other type of renewables or things. So those is not being included. So really, I really want to finish this methodology more like a wider way, and then trying to look at different, but already applied to different studies in Europe.